Mina pushed her food around her plate, trying to ignore the stares from across the cafeteria. Her silver scales caught the light from the windows, making her shimmer like metal in the sun. She knew exactly what the other students were thinking when they looked at her. The whispers always followed the same pattern. "Look at those weird eyes," someone would say, pointing at her large violet pupils that took up most of her eye space. "And that skin looks like fish scales." Being a Zilani meant being different. Her people had only joined the Galactic Coalition 3 years ago, and most students at the Academy had never seen anyone like her before. While other species had been part of the Alliance for decades, the Zilani were still the newcomers, still the strange ones. The cafeteria buzzed with conversation and laughter, but none of it included Mina. She watched as groups of Krillian students with their blue fur and pointed ears shared jokes at their tables. The tall, thin Vorthak students, with their grey skin and 3 arms, gestured wildly as they told stories. Even the newer Hexani students, who looked almost like walking trees, had found their place among the social groups. But Mina sat alone, just like she had every day for the past 6 months. "Hey, lizard girl," came a voice from behind her. Mina's shoulders tensed. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Grix, a Vorthak student who seemed to make it his daily mission to remind her she didn't belong. "Are you shedding your skin today?" Grix asked, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. His friends laughed, and Mina felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Zilani didn't actually shed their skin, but the joke never got old for bullies like Grix. Mina stabbed at her vegetables with her fork, wishing she could disappear. Back home on Zelenos, her appearance was normal. Everyone had silver scales and violet eyes. Everyone understood the way she moved, the way she spoke, the foods she ate. Here, everything about her screamed different. She remembered her first day at the Academy, when she had been excited to learn alongside students from across the galaxy. She had imagined making friends, sharing stories about their different worlds, and learning about cultures she had only read about in books. Instead, she found herself eating alone, studying alone, and walking to classes with her head down to avoid the stares. The worst part wasn't even the name-calling. It was the way conversations stopped when she approached, the way study groups suddenly became full when she asked to join, the way her roommate had requested a transfer after just 2 weeks, claiming she needed more space. Mina finished her meal quickly and gathered her things. As she stood up, she heard more whispers behind her. "I heard Zilani are cold-blooded like reptiles. That's probably why she never talks to anyone. My dad says they only got into the coalition because they have good technology, not because anyone actually likes them." The comments followed her as she walked toward the exit. Mina kept her eyes forward, her scales dulling to a darker shade of silver as they did when she felt sad or stressed. She had 6 more months left in the school year, and she couldn't imagine how she would make it through if every day continued like this. As she reached the cafeteria doors, Mina glanced back one more time at the crowded room full of students who had found their place in this new world. She wondered if she ever would. The quantum physics assignment board lit up with new project partnerships, and Mina watched as students quickly formed groups around her. She stood there awkwardly as her classmates paired off, their eyes sliding past her like she wasn't even there. "We need 1 more person for our group," announced Kira, a Krillian student with bright blue fur. Mina stepped forward hopefully, but Kira immediately turned to another student. "Oh, perfect, Zen. You can join us." Mina's heart sank as she realized what was happening. It wasn't that the groups were full, they just didn't want her in them. Professor Valk noticed her standing alone and assigned her to a group that clearly didn't want her there. The 3 other students exchanged glances before reluctantly making room for her at their table. "So, what should we work on?" Mina asked, pulling out her notes. Her quantum physics grades were the highest in the class, and she had already started thinking about solutions to their assigned problem. "We've got it covered," said Trix, a grey-skinned Vorthak student who wouldn't make eye contact with her. "Maybe you could just check our math later." Mina nodded, even though she knew they didn't really want her input. She spent the rest of the class period sitting silently while her group members discussed the project around her as if she was invisible. This same scene played out in every class. During chemistry lab, Her assigned partner did all the experiments herself, barely, letting Mina touch the equipment. In galactic history discussions, other students would build on each other's ideas but ignore anything Mina contributed, even when her points were insightful. The social events were even worse. The Academy held weekly movie nights in the common room, and Mina would arrive early, hoping to sit with other students. But as soon as she settled into a spot, the students around her would suddenly remember they needed snacks, or had to use the bathroom, or wanted better seats. Within minutes, she'd find herself sitting alone, while everyone else clustered together on the other side of the room. "Are you saving these seats?" she asked once, pointing to empty chairs near a group of students. "Oh, yes," came the quick reply, even though no one ever came to claim them. Back in her dormitory room, Mina could hear everything happening in the hallway. Her room was right next to the common area, which meant she got a front row seat to all the socializing she wasn't invited to. Every evening, as she tried to focus on her advanced physics homework, she'd hear groups of students planning weekend trips to the space station's entertainment district. "We should check out that new virtual reality center," someone would say. "Great idea. I'll message everyone in our group." Everyone except Mina. She'd put on her headphones and try to block out the sound of laughter and conversation, but it was impossible to ignore completely. Sometimes she'd catch herself pausing her study videos just to listen to what it sounded like when people were having fun together. Her grades remained perfect. In fact, they were better than most of her classmates. She understood quantum mechanics in ways that impressed even her professors. She could solve complex equations that left other students scratching their heads. But none of that seemed to matter when it came to making friends. Late at night, when the hallways finally got quiet, Mina would video call her family back on Zelenos. She'd tell them about her classes and her good grades, but she never mentioned how lonely she felt. Her parents were so proud that she was the first Zelani student at this prestigious academy. She couldn't bear to tell them that academic success meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. The transport shuttle docked at the academy station with a loud hiss, and June grabbed his single duffel bag from the overhead compartment. He'd traveled for 3 weeks to get here from the farming colonies, on the edge of human space, and everything about this place felt overwhelming. The station was massive, with gleaming metal corridors and windows that showed the stars spinning slowly outside. "Welcome to Kepler Academy," announced the automated voice system. "Please report to the administration office for orientation." June followed the signs through hallways filled with students from dozens of different species. He'd seen pictures in textbooks, but being surrounded by actual aliens was completely different. A group of tall, tree-like beings walked past him, their bark-covered skin rustling with each step. Students with blue fur and pointed ears chatted near the windows, while others with grey skin and 3 arms gestured wildly as they talked. Coming from the outer colonies meant June had grown up, around mostly humans. His family's farm was one of hundreds on a planet where the biggest excitement was harvest season. He'd worked for years to earn the test scores needed to transfer here, and now that he'd made it, he felt completely out of place. The other students he met during orientation seemed different from him. They came from Earth's major cities or the wealthy inner colonies. They wore expensive clothes and talked about places June had only seen in videos. When they asked where he was from, their polite smiles would fade slightly when he mentioned the farming colonies. "Oh, that's nice," they'd say before changing the subject. But June was used to being different. Growing up on a farm planet had taught him to watch and listen before jumping into new situations. So instead of trying to force conversations, he spent his first few days observing how things worked at the academy. That's when he noticed her. The girl with silver skin was sitting alone in the cafeteria, pushing food around her plate while other students laughed and talked at nearby tables. Her large violet eyes seemed to take in everything around her, but she kept her head down most of the time. June watched as she finished eating and walked toward the exit, passing right by groups of students who acted like she wasn't there. The sea. Next day he saw the same thing happen again, and the day after that. During his advanced mathematics class, June noticed the silver-skinned girl again. She sat in the front row and knew every answer when the professor called on her. Her explanations were clear and showed she understood concepts that other students struggled with. But when class ended and students gathered in small groups to discuss the homework, she packed up her things alone. "Excuse me," June said, walking up to her desk. "That solution you gave for the quantum equation was really smart. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it." The girl looked up, surprised that someone was talking to her. "Oh, thank you," she said quietly. "It's just about thinking of the particles as waves instead of solid objects. I'm June, by the way. I just transferred here from the farming colonies." "Mina," she replied, still looking uncertain about why he was talking to her. Over the next few days, June paid more attention to how other students treated Mina. He watched as study groups formed around her without including her. He saw how conversations stopped when she approached, and how she'd end up standing awkwardly by herself until she walked away. During lunch, he observed a group of gray-skinned students making jokes loud enough for Mina to hear. They called her Lizard Girl and made comments about her appearance that made her shoulders tense up. She never responded, just kept eating quietly while they laughed. June had experienced his share of being left out, but this was different. This was deliberate cruelty disguised as social dynamics. June carried his lunch tray across the busy cafeteria, weaving between tables filled with chattering students. He could have sat with the other human students who had started including him in their group, but instead he walked straight toward the corner table where Mina sat alone. The conversations around him seemed to get quieter as he approached her table. He could feel eyes following him, watching to see what the new human student was doing. "Mind if I sit here?" June asked, setting his tray down across from Mina. She looked up from her food, her large violet eyes wide with surprise. You sure?" she asked quietly, glancing around at the other tables. "How you could sit with them?" She nodded toward a group of human students who were openly staring at them now. "I'm sure," June said, pulling out his chair and sitting down. "Besides, I wanted to ask you about something." Mina tensed up, her silver scales seeming to dull slightly. "If this is some kind of dare or joke, I'd rather you just tell me now." June paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "What? No, it's not a joke. I wanted to ask about your research project for Professor Kell's class, the one about ancient energy sources. You actually listened to my presentation?" Mina asked, looking genuinely shocked. "Of course I did. That stuff about crystal resonance patterns was fascinating. I've never heard anything like it before." June took a bite of his food and continued talking normally, as if sitting with the most avoided student in the academy was the most natural thing in the world. Mina stared at him for a moment, clearly trying to figure out if he was being sincere. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed slightly. Most people think crystal technology is boring. They prefer plasma-based systems or quantum cores. "Well, most people are missing out then," June said. "How did you figure out that specific frequency patterns could increase energy output by 30%? For the first time since June had noticed her, Mina's face lit up with genuine excitement. "It's actually based on something my grandmother taught me when I was little. She used to work in the crystal mines on Zelanos before the war, and she noticed that certain crystals would sing when they were happy." "Crystals sing?" June asked, leaning forward with interest. "Not literally," Mina said, a small smile appearing on her face. "But they vibrate at different frequencies, depending on how much energy they're storing. My grandmother could tell which ones were the most powerful just by listening to them hum." They spent the rest of lunch talking about crystal technology, and June found himself genuinely impressed by Mina's knowledge. She wasn't just smart in a textbook way, she understood things on a level that came from growing up around the technology. "Would you maybe want to study together sometime?" June asked as they gathered their trays. "I'm still trying to catch up on some of the advanced concepts, and you seem to know this stuff better than anyone." Mina hesitated. "Are you sure? People might think it's weird if they see you hanging out with me." "Let them think whatever they want," June said. "I came here to learn, not to worry about what other people think." That evening, they met in the library's quiet section. Mina had brought a small device that looked like a crystal tuning fork, and she demonstrated how different crystals responded to various frequencies. June was amazed by how the crystals would glow brighter or dimmer, depending on the sound waves hitting them. "This is incredible," he whispered. watching a deep blue crystal pulse with light. "No wonder your people are such good engineers." Mina's scales brightened to a more vibrant silver, and June realized this might be the first time anyone at the Academy had complimented her heritage instead of mocking it. They studied together for 2 hours, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, neither of them felt completely alone. Mina was walking back from the library when she heard footsteps behind her in the empty corridor. She quickened her pace, hoping to reach the main hallway where other students would be around, but the footsteps got faster too. "Hey, lizard girl," came a familiar voice that made her stomach drop. "Where are you going so fast?" She turned around to see Grix and 3 other Vorthak students blocking her path. Their grey skin looked even more menacing under the dim corridor lights, and their 3 arms were crossed in a way that made them look bigger and more intimidating. "I'm just going back to my room," Mina said quietly, clutching her study materials closer to her chest. "With all those books?" laughed Dex, one of Grix's friends. "What's the point? Everyone knows your species only got into the coalition because you have shiny rocks that glow." "Yeah," added another student named Vex. "My dad says the Zilani are just evolutionary mistakes, like reptiles that never learned how to be proper life forms." Mina felt her scales start to dull, the way they always did when she was scared or upset. She tried to step around them, but Grix moved to block her way. "Look at those weird eyes," Grix said, pointing at her face. "They're so big and creepy, and that skin looks like it belongs on a fish, not a person." "Please just let me go," Mina whispered, but her voice was barely audible. "What's that?" Dex cupped one of his 3 ears dramatically. "I can't hear you. Do lizards even know how to speak properly?" The group laughed, and Mina felt tears starting to form in her large violet eyes. She'd dealt with their comments before, but never when she was alone with them in an empty hallway. Usually there were other students around or teachers nearby. "I bet she's cold-blooded too," Vex said. "That's probably why she never talks to anyone. Her brain doesn't work right in normal temperatures." "Maybe we should help her warm up," Grix said with a nasty grin, taking a step closer to Mina. "That's enough." The voice came from behind the group, and everyone turned to see June walking down the corridor toward them. His face was calm, but there was something in his voice that made the Vorthak students pause. "This doesn't concern you, human," Grix said, though he sounded less confident than before. "Actually, it does," June replied, walking steadily toward them. "Mina is my friend, and I don't like seeing my friends being harassed." He stopped right next to the group and looked directly at Grix. Even though June was shorter than the Vorthak students and clearly outnumbered, he didn't seem intimidated at all. "She's not your friend," Dex said with a sneer. "She's just a weird lizard thing that doesn't belong here." "That's where you're wrong," June said, stepping between Mina and the group. "And I think you need to apologize to her." The corridor got very quiet. Mina couldn't believe what she was seeing. No one had ever stood up for her before, especially not against multiple students who were bigger and stronger than them. "You can't." "Be serious," Grix said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "There are 4 of us and only 1 of you." "I can count," June replied evenly. "The question is whether you're going to apologize to Mina and walk away, or if we're going to have a problem." Mina watched in amazement as the human boy she'd only known for a few weeks stood firmly between her and her tormentors, completely unafraid despite being outnumbered. Her scales started to brighten slightly as she realized that for the first time since arriving at the academy, someone was actually willing to defend her. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut with a knife as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Grix's 3 arms tensed as he stepped closer to June, his grey skin darkening with anger. "You think you're tough, farm boy? I heard about you. You're just some nobody from the outer colonies who doesn't know how things work here." "Maybe," June said calmly, not moving an inch. "But I know bullying when I see it." "This isn't bullying," Vex chimed in. "We're just pointing out facts. Look at her, she's not normal." The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor as other students began to notice the commotion. A few Krillian students with their blue fur stopped to watch, followed by some humans from June's orientation group. Word was spreading quickly through the academy's social networks, and more students kept arriving. "You want to talk about normal?" June asked, his voice getting slightly louder so the growing crowd could hear. Let's talk about how Grix here has 3 arms instead of 2. Is that normal? Grix's face twisted with rage. That's completely different. That's just how Vorthak are supposed to look. Exactly, June said, nodding. And silver skin and violet eyes are how Zelani are supposed to look. So what's your point? Murmurs rippled through the crowd of students. Some were pulling out their communication devices to record what was happening. Mina could see students she recognized from her classes, all watching this confrontation with growing interest. "So it's not the same thing," Dex protested, but he sounded less sure of himself now. "We've been part of the coalition for decades. Her people just joined." "So that gives you the right to treat her like garbage?" June asked. "How long someone's been in the coalition doesn't determine their worth as a person." A blue-furred Krillian student named Kira spoke up from the crowd. "He's got a point. We all look different from each other." "Stay out of this," Grix snapped, but his attention was divided now between June and the growing audience. June took advantage of the moment to continue. "You know what I see when I look at Mina? I see someone who's smarter than half the students here. She understands quantum physics better than our professors. She's discovered things about crystal technology that could change how we power our ships." Mina felt her scales brightening with each word. She'd never heard anyone describe her accomplishments like that, especially not in front of so many other students. "But all you see is that her skin is different from yours," June continued, his voice carrying clearly down the corridor. "That says more about you than it does about her." "You don't understand," Grix said, but his voice was getting desperate now. "Humans always stick together. You're just defending her because you think it makes you look good." "Actually," said Hannah, one of the human students from June's orientation group, "most of us barely know him. He's from the farming colonies, remember? We didn't even invite him to eat with us until this week." The crowd was getting larger, and Mina could hear students whispering to each other about what they were witnessing. Some were nodding along with June's words, while others looked uncomfortable, as if they were realizing their own behavior for the first time. "This is ridiculous," Vex muttered. "Come on, Grix, let's go." But Grix was too angry to back down now. "No," he said, pointing one of his 3 fingers at June. "This human thinks he can come here and tell us how to act? He's going to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong people." The corridor went completely silent. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen, and all eyes were on June to see how he would respond to the direct threat. By the next morning, everyone at the academy had heard about what happened. In the corridor, students gathered in small groups, whispering about the confrontation and sharing videos that had been recorded on their devices. The footage showed June standing up to 4 Vorthak students, defending Mina when no one else would, did he? "You see how he just stood there?" Hannah asked her friends during breakfast. "I mean, Grix could have seriously hurt him, but he didn't even flinch." Some students were impressed by June's courage. A few Krillian students approached Mina during her morning classes, offering hesitant smiles and asking about her research projects. For the first time in months, she wasn't completely invisible, but not everyone was happy about the attention. "Great! Now the human thinks he's some kind of hero," muttered Zek, a Vorthak student who was friends with Grix. "He's going to make things worse for all of us." Grix himself had become even more hostile after being embarrassed in front of so many students. He and his friends started spreading rumors about June, claiming he was only defending Mina to get attention, or because he had a weird obsession with alien species. "Farm boy probably never saw a real alien before coming here," Dex said loudly in the cafeteria, making sure nearby students could hear. "He thinks they're all exotic and interesting." The tension in the academy was building, with students taking sides about whether June had done the right thing or just caused unnecessary drama. Some praised him for standing up to bullies, while others thought he should have minded his own business. Then everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon. Mina was in her advanced engineering class when the lights flickered. At first, everyone thought it was just a minor power fluctuation, something that happened occasionally on space stations. But then the lights went out completely, leaving the classroom in darkness, except for the emergency lighting strips along the floor. "Everyone stay calm," Professor Valk announced, but Mina could hear the concern in his voice. "This appears to be a station-wide power failure." The emergency communication system crackled to life throughout the academy. All students and faculty, please remain in your current locations. We are experiencing a critical power grid failure. Engineering teams are working to resolve the issue. But as the hours passed, things only got worse. The backup power systems were failing one by one. The life support systems were running on reserve power that would only last another day. The artificial gravity was becoming unstable, causing people to feel dizzy and disoriented. It's not just a normal power failure, Professor Valk explained to his class as they huddled in the dark classroom. Something is interfering with our main power crystals. They're not responding to any of our standard repair protocols. Mina's heart started racing, but not from fear. She knew about power crystals better than anyone at the academy. Her grandmother's stories about singing crystals suddenly seemed much more important than just childhood memories. "Professor," she said quietly, raising her hand in the dim emergency lighting. "I might know what's wrong." The professor turned toward her voice. "What do you mean, Mina? The Academy's power system uses Nexari crystals, right? The ancient ones that were discovered in the ruins near Jupiter?" "Yes, that's correct. They're incredibly powerful, but we don't fully understand how they work. The Coalition's best engineers spent years figuring out how to use them safely." Mina's scales brightened slightly with excitement. "But I think I know what might be happening. If someone activated an ancient artifact nearby, it could be sending out interference signals that are confusing the crystals." Suddenly, every person in the classroom was listening intently to the Zelani student they had ignored for so long. Within an hour, Mina found herself in the Academy's main engineering bay, surrounded by professors and senior students who had never given her a second glance before. The massive power crystals hummed with an unstable, chaotic energy that made everyone nervous. Warning lights flashed red across all the control panels. "The crystals are completely out of sync," explained Chief Engineer Torres, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We've tried everything. Frequency adjustments, power cycling, even shutting down individual crystal nodes. Nothing works." Vina stepped closer to the largest crystal, a towering blue structure that pulsed with erratic light. She closed her eyes and listened carefully, just like her grandmother had taught her years ago. "They're scared," she said quietly. "What?" "Professor," Valk asked, leaning forward. "The crystals are afraid. There's something sending out signals that they don't recognize, and they're trying to protect themselves by shutting down." June pushed through the crowd of adults to stand next to Mina. "What do you need?" he asked simply. "I need to find the source of the interference," Mina said. "And then I need to teach the crystals that it's safe to work again." Chief Engineer Torres looked skeptical. "Miss, with all due respect, these are the most advanced power systems in the galaxy. Our best engineers have been working on this for hours, but none of them grew up listening to crystals sing," June said firmly. "Mina knows things about crystal technology that aren't in any textbook." As if to prove his point, Mina walked to a smaller crystal near the edge of the room and placed her hand against its surface. She hummed a low musical note, and the crystal's chaotic pulsing began to slow down slightly. "How did you do that?" asked Dr. Kim, the Academy's head of advanced sciences. "Crystals respond to sound frequencies, but not just any sound. They need to hear harmonies that make them feel calm and safe." Mina moved to another crystal and hummed a different note. "My grandmother used to sing to the crystals in the mines. She said they worked better when they were happy." More students had gathered to watch, including some who had never spoken to Mina before. Even Kira, the blue-furred Krillian who had avoided her for months, was pushing forward to get a better view. "But we still need to find what's causing the interference," Chief Engineer Torres pointed out. "Already on it," said June, pulling out a handheld scanner he'd borrowed from the engineering lab. "If something is sending out signals strong enough to disrupt the main power grid, it should show up on these readings." Working together, June and Mina began tracking the interference signal through the station's corridors. A small group of students followed them, including some who had been recording videos of the crisis on their devices. "The signal is getting stronger this way," June called out, following his scanner down a maintenance corridor that most students had never seen before. They found it in an old storage room, an ancient artifact that had been brought to the Academy for research. Someone had accidentally activated it during a routine examination, and it had been broadcasting powerful energy waves for hours. "Can you shut it off?" asked Hannah, who had joined the group despite having barely spoken to either June or Mina before. "Not. Shut it off," Mina said, studying the artifact carefully. "But I can teach it to work with our crystals instead of against them." She began humming again, this time a complex harmony that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. The ancient artifact's chaotic energy patterns began to shift, becoming more organized and rhythmic. "It's working," June said, watching his scanner. "Readings change. The interference is becoming regular, like a heartbeat." Back in the engineering bay, the massive power crystals began responding to the new organized signals. Their light shifted from chaotic red to steady blue, and the warning alarms finally went quiet. "Life support is back to full power," announced Chief Engineer Torres, staring at his control panels in amazement. "All systems are stable." The crowd of students erupted in cheers, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, they were cheering for Mina. The cafeteria looked completely different to Mina now. Instead of walking to her usual empty corner table, she found herself surrounded by students who wanted to sit with her. The girl who had saved the entire academy from power failure was no longer invisible. "Mina, over here," called Kira, the blue-furred Krillian student who had ignored her for months. "We saved you a seat." As Mina sat down with her lunch tray, she noticed how natural it felt to be part of a conversation instead of listening to one from far away. Students asked her questions about crystal technology, about her home planet Zelenos, and about how she had learned to communicate with ancient artifacts. "I still can't believe you could hear what the crystals were feeling," said Hannah, shaking her head in amazement. "That's like having a superpower." "It's not a superpower," Mina replied with a smile. "It's just something my people have always known how to do. We live with crystals every day on Zelenos." June sat across from her, grinning as he watched Mina. Finally getting the recognition she deserved. "I told you guys she was brilliant. You just had to actually listen to her." The change wasn't just about popularity, though. Mina had gained something much more important: confidence. When Professor Valk announced a new research project about ancient technologies, Mina didn't hesitate to raise her hand with ideas. When study groups formed, other students actively asked her to join them. But the biggest change was how Mina started noticing other students who were struggling the way she had been. "Hey," she said one day to a new student named Kai, who belonged to a recently discovered species called the Xylan. His rock-like skin and glowing orange eyes made him stand out even more than Mina's silver scales had. "Mind if I sit here?" Kai looked up in surprise from his lunch, clearly expecting another student to make fun of his appearance. "Are you sure? People might think you're weird for sitting with me." "Trust me," Mina said with a knowing smile. "I know exactly how that feels, but weird can be pretty amazing once people give you a chance." Soon, Mina had formed an informal support group for students who felt like outsiders at the academy. They met in the library every week, sharing study tips and offering encouragement to each other. June often joined them, helping newer students navigate the social dynamics of the academy. "You know what's funny?" June said one evening as he and Mina worked on their advanced physics homework together. "When I first came here, I thought the hardest part would be keeping up with the academics." "And now?" Mina asked, looking up from her crystal resonance calculations. "Now I realize the academics are easy compared to figuring out how to treat people with respect. That shouldn't be the hard part, but somehow it is for a lot of students." Their friendship had become famous throughout the academy. Other students pointed to them as proof that species differences didn't have to create barriers. The academy's administration even asked them to speak at orientation sessions for new students, sharing their story about how standing up for what's right can change everything. "I got accepted to the Advanced Xenoarchaeology program," Mina announced excitedly during one of their study sessions. "They want me to join an expedition to explore newly discovered ruins in the Andromeda sector." "That's incredible," June said, then paused. "I'm going to miss having a study partner who actually understands quantum mechanics," Mina grinned. "Who says you're not coming with me? They need engineers on archaeological expeditions, and I specifically requested someone from Earth's agricultural colonies. Apparently, farm experience teaches you to solve problems creatively." As they looked out the Academy's observation deck at the stars beyond, Both friends felt ready for whatever adventures waited for them in the galaxy. They had learned that the universe was big enough for everyone, as long as people were willing to listen, learn, and stand up for each other when it mattered most.